June 18th, 1940. The calendar says summer, but the war feels like it's already over. In the United States, the mood in the press is blunt. Big American papers and magazines look at the map, look at France collapsing, and start writing Britain's ending like it's a scheduled event. The message is basically, Britain can't hold on by itself. Germany is too strong. The fall is just a matter of time. Even inside the U.S. government, some advisors warn that sending equipment to Britain is like tossing gear into a ship that's already going under. Across the Atlantic, America's ambassador in London sends grim cables back to Washington. The takeaway reads like a verdict. Democracy in Britain is finished, and the rest is just paperwork. A lot of Americans believe it. Plenty of Germans believe it too. After Poland, after Norway, after the Low Countries, after France, Germany has a pattern. Fast campaigns, rapid collapse, political surrender follows military shock. That's the modern formula. But there's a problem. The people actually flying the missions over Britain, especially the Luftwaffe crews, are starting to see something that doesn't match the headlines. Not bravery, not miracles. Something colder than that, organization. If you like W.E. stories that dig into the stuff most people skip, make sure you're subscribed, because this one is all about the unglamorous details that decided who lived and who lost. Germany's leadership enters summer 1940 with a calculator's confidence. Poland fell in weeks, Denmark in hours. France, the giant of World War I memory, collapsed in a matter of weeks too. On paper, Britain should follow the same script. Break the Air Force, gain control of the skies. Then the island either sues for peace or gets invaded under cover of air power. That assumption shapes German planning. The thinking is simple. Once Britain loses air superiority, everything else becomes impossible. No safe shipping, no stable industry, no real defense. Britain's stop sign gets kicked out of the ground, and the rest is gravity. So the Luftwaffe goes to work. And soon, the reports coming back to German command start to sound. Irritated, confused, then worried, German pilots begin describing a strange kind of fight. They're not just being intercepted, they're being met. Not sometimes, not by chance. Consistently, raids approach the English coast under cloud cover, and British fighters show up at the right altitude anyway. German formations shift, and British squadrons seem to be waiting where the Germans are heading. It feels less like a normal air battle and more like walking into an ambush that was set up before you arrived. The words in German after-action summaries, at least the meaning, even when the language stays formal, start circling the same idea. How are they always there? Here is what makes this so unsettling to a professional air force. In a normal fight, the defender has a basic problem. Britain is an island, yes, but the attacker chooses the moment. The attacker chooses the route. The attacker has initiative. The defender is supposed to react late. Scramble fighters after the bombs are already near. Guess the target. Waste fuel climbing in the wrong direction. Miss intercept windows. Show up too low, too high, too far behind, too early. That's what German airmen expect to see from a country that supposedly has fewer resources and is running out of pilots. Instead, the British keep showing up like someone handed them the schedule. German commanders compile pilot testimony and keep running into the same claim. British fighters repeatedly gain the better position before the first shot is even fired. They intercept through weather that should hide an incoming raid. They arrive in the air lanes like they were guided there. In captured prisoner interrogations and in the chatter, German intelligence hears about British methods. A detail starts circulating that sounds almost ridiculous to the Luftwaffe at first. The British can see raids on screens. Screens. That word shouldn't matter in a dogfight, but it does because it hints at something bigger than pilot skill. It hints that the RAF isn't just fighting with airplanes, it's fighting with information. German staff officers do what staff officers do. They try to turn mystery into a list of parts. If the British are anticipating routes and altitude, then the British must have a way to detect raids early, track them, and pass that tracking to fighter controllers fast enough to matter. In summer 1940, Germany has radar too, at least in forms that exist and work in limited roles. But what German planners don't expect is scale, integration, and discipline. They expect radar to be one tool, not the backbone of an entire defense. What German pilots are describing is not random luck. It's consistent interception across wide areas, in conditions where visual spotting should fail. That consistency is what shakes them. Weather changes, clouds change, routes change, yet the British response looks steady. And steady response usually means a system is doing the work. German intelligence begins asking practical questions. How many stations does Britain have? How far can they see? What happens if a station gets hit? How quickly can Britain repair it? Does the whole thing collapse if you knock out a few key points? These are not theoretical questions. They're life and death, because every wasted minute over Britain costs aircraft and crews that Germany cannot replace forever. By early August 1940, the Luftwaffe is preparing for a decisive blow. The plan is to crush the RAF in the air and on the ground. The thinking is, break the fighter force and Britain's political heart will crack soon after. Then comes mid-August, Germany's big push. The moment Luftwaffe leadership believes will prove their earlier math correct. One raid in particular shows the problem in a way pilots can't ignore. A German formation moves toward its target under overcast skies. The approach is meant to be quiet, clean, and hard to spot. Cloud cover should be protection. Radio discipline should reduce clues. The attackers believe they have stacked the deck, but British fighters slice down through the clouds already at the advantage. They aren't climbing late. They aren't scrambling in panic. They're positioned to strike. The German crews who survive write the question in their reports in different ways, but it is always the same question. How did they know where we would be? This is the moment where German frustration turns into something sharper. If Britain is spotting raids the moment they lift off from airfields across the Channel, that means the British are not just reacting, they are tracking. Tracking changes everything. Tracking means Britain can calculate heading, speed, and likely targets. Tracking means the RAF can wait, conserve fuel, avoid the wrong fights, and choose the right ones. Tracking also means Germany is losing the biggest advantage an attacker normally has: surprise. One German operational analyst makes the point in a form that spreads. The RAF's interception rate remains high regardless of weather. When that happens again and again, it stops looking like luck. It starts looking like a machine. And once you accept that it's a machine, you stop thinking you're fighting pilots. You start thinking you're fighting a network. This is the heart of German discomfort in 1940. Germany has talented pilots and good aircraft. Germany expects those things to be decisive. But talent and hardware don't matter the same way when the other side is being fed cleaner information. It's like trying to win a street fight while the other guy has a coach whispering every move you make, where you're stepping, when you're tired, where your opening will be. German crews describe British radio control as crisp and professional. Controllers give headings and altitudes with confidence that suggests they aren't guessing. They are receiving live data. They are directing fighters in 3 dimensions: up, down, left, right, like pieces moved on a board. And Germany hates that metaphor because it implies British control is deeper than German control. It implies Britain sees more of the board. So the Luftwaffe tries to do what it does best: break the enemy's key nodes. They begin attacking Britain's coastal radar sites. German raid leaders hit several stations. Reconnaissance photographs show damage. From a distance, it looks like progress. If radar is the eyes, then blinded eyes should reduce interceptions. But then the next day comes, and the intercepts still happen. British fighters continue to meet raids at high rates. They keep appearing in the right places. The blindness Germany expects doesn't arrive. That is when German planners realize they may have misunderstood the structure of the system. Maybe the radar chain isn't a single fragile line. Maybe it's layered, redundant, repairable. Maybe Britain can take hits on the coast and still maintain coverage through overlapping stations, inland detection, and control rooms that can reroute information. If the British have built depth, real depth, then Germany can't simply punch one hole and expect the whole defense to leak out. The German questions become more urgent and more specific. How many stations are there really? If we destroy a few, how much capability disappears? If the British still keep intercepting after damage, is it because repairs are faster than expected? or because there are more stations than we estimated. German technical estimates begin to look weak. Pilots are telling them the same story. Cloud cover doesn't save raids. Changes in approach don't fool the defense. If anything, the defense feels like it tightens when Germany tries to be clever. More and more, the Luftwaffe's experience feels like battling an enemy who is invisible in the old way, because Britain can choose when to reveal its fighters. The RAF can avoid fights when outnumbered and show up when it wants the exchange. That ability isn't magic, it's control. And control comes from information processed fast. By late August, German thinking shifts. It's no longer, "we need better pilots," or "we need more fighters." The uncomfortable conclusion creeping through reports is, we are at a systemic disadvantage. If Britain can build real-time awareness of German operations while Germany has only fragmented awareness of British operations, then skill alone can't fix it. If Britain can concentrate fighters quickly and Germany can't predict where the concentration will appear, then numerical superiority becomes slippery. You can have more aircraft overall and still be outmatched at the point of contact. German officers begin describing the feeling in dark, simple terms. Britain has turned the sky into a kind of board game where one side sees the whole layout and the other side mostly sees its own pieces. It's a brutal way to think about air war, but it matches what German pilots are living. The system isn't invincible. British aircraft are still being shot down. Airfields are still being bombed. Britain bleeds. Britain loses people. Britain loses machines. But the system survives. And as long as it survives, Britain's defense stays good enough. Not perfect, not glamorous, just good enough, day after day, to keep Germany from turning tactical pressure into strategic collapse. And that good enough is exactly what makes professional German planners uneasy, because good enough sustained over time is how attackers get trapped in stalemates they didn't plan for. Some German pilots who end up captured later in the campaign describe the same frustration in different words. The British always seemed to know, always seemed to be there. Not because they were braver, not because they had endless airplanes, because they had information and they used it like a weapon. That is the secret hiding behind the summer headlines back in America. While newspapers declare Britain finished, the Luftwaffe is discovering that Britain is not fighting like a nation waiting to die. Britain is fighting like a nation that built a machine to make sure it doesn't die. And as the Luftwaffe keeps slamming into that machine, Germany is about to make a choice that will shock the world, because it will look like a change in strategy. But really, it's something else. It's the first sign that Germany's easy math on Britain was wrong, and the next phase of the war, daylight, night, sea, and desert, will prove just how wrong it was. By early September 1940, the Luftwaffe has learned an ugly truth about Britain's daylight defense. It is not one squadron. It is not one heroic unit. It is not even one airfield. It is a whole structure that keeps functioning even when parts of it get hit. And when an attacker realizes the defender's system is hard to break, the attacker does what attackers have done for centuries. They change the rules. Germany shifts focus away from daylight attacks designed to crush the RAF directly. The new idea is simpler and more brutal. Hit the cities, hit the people, and make Britain's will crack. If fighters keep showing up in daylight because the RAF can be guided to the right place, then take away daylight, take away visibility, turn the war into darkness, confusion, exhaustion, and fear. This is the opening of the Blitz. The logic sounds clean on paper. Britain's fighters cannot easily intercept at night. Night favors the bomber. Cities burn, morale collapses, politics fractures, and Churchill's government is forced into a deal. German leadership talks about the coming firestorm like it is inevitable, but the men actually flying these night raids quickly discover a problem that is almost embarrassing in its simplicity. Owning the night does not mean controlling the night. In the dark, even the bomber crews can't always find what they are supposed to hit. Navigation is harder, targets are harder, bombing becomes less precision and more hope. Crews drop their loads and pray they did something meaningful. On the ground, British defenses do not disappear just because the sun is gone. Searchlights sweep the sky. Anti-aircraft guns fire by pattern, by radar cues, and by practiced routines. It is not perfect, but it is active. It is constant. It is nerve-wracking. And then German airmen start reporting something they did not expect at all. British fighters begin showing up at night, not in large numbers, not in a way that wipes out the bomber force overnight, but enough to change how it feels to fly a mission. Because if a German crew believes night makes them safe, they fly differently. They take risks. They stay higher. They approach with less fear of sudden interception. If night no longer feels safe, everything changes. Morale drops. Crews start seeing shadows as threats. Fatigue becomes heavier. Confidence drains away. In late 1940, German intelligence begins receiving reports that are deeply unsettling. Bombers are being intercepted in darkness in ways that should not be possible without some kind of detection aid. In a few cases, the evidence points to a breakthrough, aircraft being guided to targets without relying on searchlights or moonlight alone. The British appear to be building a night defense that is not just random luck. Germany has spent the summer learning that Britain's big advantage is information. Now, Germany is starting to suspect that Britain is carrying that advantage into the night. For German planners, this is more than a tactical annoyance. It is an attack on the one escape route they believe they had. If the RAF can't be crushed in daylight because of an integrated defense network, then the bombers were supposed to shift pressure into a place the RAF cannot follow. But now the RAF is following. And once again, the pattern looks familiar. It is not just a pilot did a brave thing. It looks like a system is being built. German specialists begin assessing what this could mean. If Britain can equip aircraft with airborne detection gear and pair that with some kind of ground control, then night interception stops being a rare accident and becomes a repeatable process. A repeatable process is the enemy of any offensive plan. German bomber losses at night are not catastrophic at first. They rise in a way that is slow but steady. The numbers are small enough that a headline writer might ignore them. But to military analysts, trend lines matter more than single nights, and the trend line is moving in the wrong direction. As reports accumulate, German crews begin describing the experience in almost the same emotional language, even when they try to sound professional. They talk about being pursued in darkness by something they cannot see first. They talk about tracers appearing as if the air itself is attacking them. They talk about turning and diving and still feeling followed. This is not just physical danger, it is psychological pressure. And psychological pressure is exactly what the Blitz was supposed to create on Britain. Instead, it is beginning to spread through the German bomber force. At the same time, the other major part of the Blitz plan is also failing. Britain's civilian morale does not collapse the way German models predict. Cities take damage, people die, neighborhoods burn, infrastructure is hit. But Britain continues. Civil defense crews keep working. Fire brigades respond under danger. Rail lines are repaired. Ports reopen. Factories shift production, relocate machines, and keep making war material. Workers show up even when buildings are damaged, operating from whatever space is still usable. German observers who fly over British cities and then report what they see do not describe a society falling apart. They describe a society adapting. The German theory was straightforward. Bombing would trigger fear. Fear would trigger political fracture. Fracture would trigger surrender. But what German intelligence keeps finding is the opposite. External pressure is producing internal unity. British leadership messaging emphasizes endurance and shared sacrifice. Instead of panic and collapse, the population appears to settle into a mindset of long-term survival. Britain is not trying to win quickly. Britain is trying to refuse defeat, day after day, until the attacker runs out of clean options. To German planners raised on the recent success of rapid campaigns, this is hard to process. They have experience with governments breaking under shock. They have experience with armies collapsing after decisive blows. What they are seeing in Britain is slower and tougher. The state remains stable, and the people do not behave like a population on the verge of surrender. So by late 1940, Germany is facing a strange reality. Daylight offensives are not producing decisive results because Britain's air defense is integrated and resilient. Night bombing is not producing political collapse, and it is slowly becoming more dangerous as Britain adapts. The sea blockade is not yet delivering the quick strangulation Germany expected. And then another report arrives that forces German leadership to confront a question they do not want to ask. If Britain is finished, why is Britain attacking? December 9, 1940, in North Africa, Britain launches Operation Compass. From a distance, it looks impossible. Italy has large forces in Libya. Britain's forces in the area are smaller and stretched thin. Britain is still defending the home islands, still under air attack, still protecting convoys, still holding parts of a global empire. And yet Britain goes on the offensive, not with a symbolic raid, not with a desperate gesture, with a real operation planned, coordinated, and executed as a combined arms strike. Italian positions are hit from multiple directions. Strongpoints are bypassed and isolated. British armor moves fast and infantry follows to lock in ground gained. Artillery supports the movement instead of being stuck in one place. The key detail here is not that Italy performs poorly, though that becomes part of the story. The key detail is what German observers conclude about Britain. This is not improvisation. This is doctrine applied with competence. And competence is exactly what American headlines were dismissing back in June. As the offensive unfolds, prisoner counts rise quickly. Italian units retreat, surrender, or lose cohesion under pressure. The British advance expands over weeks, not as a one-day surprise, but as a sustained campaign that keeps rolling. German staff officers who read these updates do not just see an Italian problem. They see a British capability problem, meaning Germany's earlier assumptions about Britain are now suspect. Britain was supposed to be a cornered animal, clinging to the island and waiting for the last blow. Cornered animals do not execute effective desert offensives while still taking punishment at home. So German assessments start changing tone. They begin to note that British forces can coordinate armor, infantry, and artillery in a way that creates speed and confusion for the opponent. They begin to note that British planning and logistics are functioning well enough to sustain movement in harsh terrain. They begin to note that Britain seems able to do more than one major thing at once, and that last point is the one that really hurts German strategic logic. Because if Britain can defend its airspace with an integrated control network, endure bombing without political collapse, and still launch offensive ground operations overseas, then Britain is not in its final phase. Britain has reserves, not endless reserves, not unlimited strength, but enough reserve capacity to keep choosing actions instead of just reacting. That means Germany's timeline to British collapse is not just wrong, it might be fantasy. This is where German thinking begins to harden into a grim kind of respect. Not admiration, not friendliness, but professional recognition that the opponent is not behaving as predicted. Britain, under pressure, is not simply surviving by emotion. Britain is surviving through functioning systems. The same theme keeps repeating across the theater map. In the air, radar detection, filtering, sector control, and guided interception that reduces wasted effort. At night, early, imperfect, but real steps toward hunting bombers in darkness rather than merely enduring them. On the ground abroad, coordinated operations that show planning, logistics, and tactical discipline still exist. The more Germany watches this, the more dangerous the situation becomes for Germany's wider strategy, because German planning was built around Britain collapsing quickly enough that Germany could focus elsewhere without leaving a threat at its back. But Britain is not collapsing. Britain is forcing Germany to keep spending time, fuel, crews, and aircraft without decisive returns. And that is the definition of a strategic trap. By early 1941, German senior leadership is no longer asking, when will Britain fall? They are asking, why hasn't it fallen? That question triggers deeper reassessments inside the German high command, and those reassessments will soon collide with three realities that American headlines largely missed at the time. First, the hidden math of the Battle of the Atlantic. Second, the evidence that British morale is not cracking the way bombing theory predicts. Third, a blunt conclusion German intelligence will put into official language. The campaign against Britain has not achieved its strategic goals. That is where the story goes next, because once Germany admits Britain cannot be finished quickly, Germany has to choose what to do about it. And that choice will shape the rest of the war. By early 1941, the biggest German problem isn't a single battle, it's the pattern. Daylight raids aren't delivering a knockout because Britain's air defense keeps functioning as a system. Night bombing isn't breaking the public's will the way German theory promised. And overseas, Britain has enough capacity to launch real offensives instead of just hanging on. But there's one arena where German planners still believe they can force Britain to fold: the ocean. Britain is an island. Britain needs imports: food, fuel, raw materials, war supplies, everything that keeps factories running and people fed. German naval strategy is built on a cold assumption: if you cut the shipping lanes long enough, Britain's economy and morale will collapse even if the RAF survives. That's why U-boats matter. That's why 1940 is supposed to be Germany's moment to squeeze Britain until it can't breathe. And in the American press, U-boats do look terrifying. Headlines focus on sinking ships and burning oil and desperate convoys. But inside German Naval Command, the reports don't read like victory. They read like a fight getting harder. A U-boat captain watches a convoy through a periscope and expects the usual script: hit the escort, then pick off merchants as they scatter in panic. Instead, some convoys don't scatter randomly. They maneuver with purpose. Smoke goes up at the right time. Ships zigzag in coordinated patterns. A few vessels even move in ways that force the submarine to dive and lose contact. When the U-boat surfaces later, the convoy is gone. That is not how German planners want merchant crews to behave. And it isn't just one weird convoy. German submarine commanders begin noting the same frustrating trend. Escorts are improving fast. They coordinate better. Convoy routes feel less predictable. Attacks take longer to set up, and the opportunities close faster. Even when a captain does everything right, stays patient, chooses the angle, gets into position, he's more likely to find that the convoy has already altered course. That detail scares German analysts more than any single escort ship because it hints at something bigger than tactics. It hints at information again. If convoys are turning away before the U-boats even strike, that suggests the British are either spotting submarines earlier than expected, or they are using intelligence to route ships around patrol areas. Either way, the effect is the same: fewer contacts, fewer attacks, fewer sinkings. And German command tracks this the way accountants track a business. They count ships sunk. They count boats at sea. They measure output per patrol. Those numbers matter because U-boat war is supposed to be a math problem with a clean solution. Sink ships faster than Britain can replace them, and Britain breaks. But in late 1940, German summaries start showing a different math problem. British defense measures are improving faster than German offensive capacity. You can see it in the monthly totals. Some months are worse, some months are better, but the trend in effectiveness per U-boat begins slipping. More boats are operating, but the average number of ships sunk per boat drops. That's the nightmare scenario for a strategy based on inevitability. Because the sea campaign isn't just about courage or daring, it's about efficiency. A U-boat is expensive. Crews are hard to replace. Construction takes time. Patrols burn fuel and wear equipment. If a boat spends weeks at sea and comes home empty, that's not just a bad patrol. That's the whole theory of victory weakening. German Naval Command begins writing in the language of sustainability. If the sinking rate falls below the line where Britain's shipbuilding and repairs can recover, then the blockade cannot achieve decisive results. It becomes pressure, not collapse. And Britain, again, seems to be doing the boring work that matters: better routing, better escort coordination, wider air patrol coverage, and tighter procedures. Germany has submarines. Britain has a network. And once more, the network keeps turning German strength into stalemate. While this hidden battle plays out on the water, German leadership is also watching the Blitz's psychological results. And it's not what they promised Hitler. German intelligence collects everything it can: reports from pilots, intercepts, observations of damage, estimates of production, and assessments of public mood. The goal is to answer a simple political question: is Britain cracking? And by the start of 1941, the answer keeps coming back the same way: not really. British cities are hurt, but they are still functioning. Fire services keep operating. Repairs happen fast. Transport lines get patched. Ports reopen. Factories don't just restart, they often adapt, spreading production, shifting shifts, and working around damage. German observers looking for panic instead find routine. That routine is infuriating to a bombing campaign designed to create fear-driven collapse. Germany expects terror to snowball into political defeat. Instead, the British population appears to absorb the damage and keep going. German intelligence reports also note something else. Political unity holds. Public support for Churchill stays strong. Recruitment continues. War production trends upward over time rather than crashing. That doesn't mean Britain is fine. It means Britain is stable enough to fight. And stability is everything when one side is trying to survive rather than win quickly. This flips German logic on its head. The Blitz isn't failing because it's soft. It's failing because Britain isn't reacting the way German models predicted. Britain is treating survival as its own form of victory. Month by month, German command becomes trapped in a strange position. Germany is inflicting damage, real damage, but it is not translating into strategic decision. Britain is not suing for peace. Britain is not splitting politically. Britain is not losing the ability to function. Britain is simply continuing. And for planners who expected modern war to end fast, that continuing becomes a kind of enemy weapon. By February 1941, German leadership does something it rarely wants to do after a major campaign. They admit, on paper, that their objectives have not been met. Inside the German High Command, comprehensive assessments are compiled to explain why Britain did not collapse in 1940. These documents are not emotional. They are not propaganda. They read like technicians arguing with reality. They stack up the evidence. Britain's military capacity remains intact enough to defend its airspace. Britain's political structure remains stable. British defensive systems have proven more resilient than predicted. British counteractions overseas have exceeded expectations. And most importantly, current methods are not producing decisive results. That last point is the quiet, bureaucratic way of saying the plan didn't work. This is the turning point in the story American headlines missed. In June 1940, much of the world talked as if Britain's defeat was already decided. By early 1941, Germany's own internal reporting is forced to deal with the opposite. Britain is not already beaten, and Germany does not have a clean, reliable path to finishing the job. And that creates a strategic crisis for Germany, because Germany is not built for long, grinding, multi-front contests against an opponent that refuses to collapse. Germany's earlier wins were fast. They relied on shock, speed, and political breakdown. Britain is not offering that breakdown. Britain is offering endurance. Endurance is expensive to fight. Endurance forces Germany to keep spending aircraft, crews, submarines, fuel, and attention month after month without decisive payoff. And this is where a dangerous temptation grows in German thinking. If Britain can't be finished quickly, then maybe Britain can be contained while Germany turns elsewhere, because there is another target that German leadership believes can be defeated the way France was defeated, a huge land enemy that can be smashed by a decisive campaign. That target is the Soviet Union. This choice, diverting focus and resources east, matters because it changes the pressure on Britain. The reference point German officers keep circling is simple. Britain's position in late 1940 is strained. Air defenses are working, but barely. Shipping losses are serious. Civilian morale is tested. Britain is under real stress. Germany comes close, and German assessments acknowledge, directly or indirectly, that if pressure had been kept at maximum intensity for longer through spring and into 1941, Britain might have been pushed into a worse place. But might have is not what happened. What happened is that Germany shifts. Resources, planning energy, and strategic obsession move toward the east. The Luftwaffe and the Kriegsmarine continue fighting Britain, but the idea of a single decisive blow fades. The war becomes wider. Britain gets time. And time is what Britain has been trying to buy from the start. That's the unsexy core of this story. Britain in 1940 doesn't win in the way movies usually show winning. Britain survives with systems that keep working under pressure: detection, filtering, command and control, logistics, repair, routing, and governance, radar operators tracking contacts, controllers directing squadrons efficiently, convoy planners adjusting routes, shipyards and factories repairing and producing, civil defense and firefighters responding night after night, leaders maintaining cohesion, workers showing up, not glamorous, not cinematic, But it turns out those boring systems can beat a force that's stronger on paper if they hold long enough. This is why the American story in June 1940 was so wrong. It treated war like a headline. One nation finished, the other nation won. End of story. The German story in early 1941 is different. It treats war like a competition between organizations, between systems, run by humans who either keep those systems working or let them collapse. Britain, battered and outgunned in many categories, keeps the system alive, and that changes the entire war, because once Britain remains in the fight, everything else becomes possible later. American aid can build, industrial output can scale, training pipelines can grow, new technologies can spread, the Atlantic link can harden. Allied strategy can form around a base that never fell. So when you look back at those June 1940 predictions, Britain has weeks, Britain can't hold on, Britain is basically done. What you're really seeing is people confusing Britain is in danger with Britain is defeated. Those are not the same thing. Germany learns that the hard way, not from speeches, but from reports. Not from theater, but from numbers. Not from romance, but from results. And when the smoke clears on the first 8 months after France falls, the simplest historical fact is also the most important. Britain wasn't finished. Not because anyone wanted an inspiring story, because after months of effort, air raids, sea pressure, and psychological warfare, Germany could not force Britain to accept defeat. The verdict that mattered didn't come from a newspaper headline. It came from the reality Germany ran into. A battered country that stayed functional, stayed organized, and stayed in the war long enough for survival to become its own kind of victory.